First thing we start off with is, in this case, pre-mounting our support plates. The support plates are required to give the support bearings adequate support for the top two legs. You can see in this case, we need to have that extra support up here. So step one is insert the bar into the set of bores that we're going to be repairing. Secondly, we'll introduce the centering cones. Next, we tighten one set of the centering cones, or one of the cones. Next, slide into the bore. Hold pressure against the second cone and tighten. Next, we'll introduce the support brackets or support bearings. Support bearings we have set up with we call these the setup plugs. And in this case, because the ears are set in a ways from the mounting surface, we've inverted the brackets. We can also, on other jobs where the surfaces are the same, we can switch it the other way, which is the standard position. As again, we're going to use the inverted position in this job. Slide on to the bar. And with these base plates allow us to make adjustments after we've removed our cones if necessary, in X and a Y fashion. Next, we need to install the cross clamp, washer, and securing nut. Before tightening this screw, we want to make sure that all four of these screws are touching the base plate. They're all good. Now we'll tighten. Now we move to the far side. Okay. Again, make sure all the leveling screws are down. And lastly, insert the clamping bolt or stud and tighten. Cross clamp. Now we can remove the cones. We'll now slide the bar out of the support brackets. Being careful not to drop the cones as we do so. Next, we will remove the setup plug on the far side. This is where we'll have the boring bar drive mounted. Insert into the support bracket and tighten. Next, we can slide the bar back through. Checking the location of the key. Key is at 6 o'clock. Next, we can slide the bar back this way towards the drive and remove the near side support plug. On this side, we'll install the bearing. It's important with these bearings to make sure there's lubrication. We recommend any standard grade of motor oil, such as 10W40, slide into the support bracket and then secure. Next, we'll install the axial feed box onto the bar. Slide it on the bar and then thread the feed screw into the receiver on the rotational feed box. Next, we need to tighten the locking nut. At this point, I'm going to place the cutter into the tool port that's nearest the bore that I'm working on. Now, it's important to always place the cutter in the rear port, or the last port that goes into the bore that you're working on. By doing this, it allows us to use the snap gauge to measure the bore between the rough cut and the final cut stage without having to remove our cutter. This is to show you the proper orientation of your cutting bit. The chip breaker groove is here. Always have the sharp edge here in this orientation. Direction of rotation always is this way. Next, we're going to tighten the feed box onto the bar. Now, before we do that, we want to make sure that we have adequate travel on our feed screw. So measure from the finish point of the bore to the cutter position. Then check over here and make sure that you have enough travel on the feed screw. In this case, we do in this position. So we can tighten the bore, or tighten the clamp, locking the bar to the feed box at this location. Now we're ready to insert the motor into the rotational gearbox. Now we secure the motor by tightening. Next thing we want to do, using the manual feed wheel, bring the cutter in close to the bore and double check your cut depth. Since this is the rough cut stage, we just want to machine out enough of the bore to ideally make it round and to take out any impurities that may have been left behind from the pin or bushing that was in the bore when it was in service. Make a slight adjustment and retighten. Now we're ready to cut. At this stage, with the motor in place, the gearbox is tight, We want to make sure that our cutter is away from the edge of the bore a little bit. And now we can turn the machine on. And slowly bring in the cutter via the feed wheel. And adjust the feed rate here on the feed adjuster on the back of the axial feed unit. To adjust for RPMs, we have a 4-speed transmission. There are 2 gear selectors and fine-tune adjustment here. To engage, push down. To feed this way. To engage the feed to go that way, we pull this lever up. We're now cleaning the bore out, prepping it for the weld. We're done cutting the bore. We've gotten the bore prepared for the welding. I'm going to bring the cutter out of the bore and then remove the cutting bit. Next, we will loosen the clamp that's holding the feed box onto the bar, or securing it to the bar. And this will allow us to slide the bar back out of the way, making room for the welder on the far side. We slide it out of the way. Now we go over here, loosen the clamp screw, and slide our bearing out. Insert the bore welder adapter and secure by tightening the clamp screw. Next, we'll install the bore welder drive. And tighten the clamp. Now we're ready to put the gun on and weld up our bore. I'll insert the torch conduit into the torch extension receiver. Tighten. Next, we put the clutch into the neutral position and then slide the spindle to reveal the spindle lock. To telescope our gun, we loosen the spindle lock and then slide the gun into the bore that we want to repair. Then adjust the gun for proper offset and lock. We'll measure the bore, check on the cheat sheet for the proper rotation speed, set the rotation speed, plug in the power for the drive, and begin welding. At this stage, we're done with our welding. We're going to remove the welder. We can now slide our bar back through. And now we will replace the bearing. Insert the bearing. And retighten. We'll insert our cutter and get ready for the rough cut. With the cutting bit inserted, tighten the clamp on the feed box, securing it to the bar, getting it ready for feeding. Now we can turn on the machine. At this stage, after the rough cut's been done, we need to measure the bore. We use the snap gauge for that. Insert the snap gauge and adapter. Feed the assembly into the bore. And release the thumb screw. Retighten thumb screw. And then measure the bore size. Okay, now we'll insert the tool adjuster adjacent to the tool. Tighten the screw to hold the retaining block for the tool adjuster. And turn the adjuster up till it makes contact with the cutter. Zero out the unit. Loosen the set screw, holding the cutter, and make the final adjustment. In this case, we want to shoot for 15 thousandths adjustment on the cutter, cutting the bore out 30 thousandths to finish. Now we can remove our adjuster and go ahead for our finish cut. First, we'll bring our cutter in closer, but not too close. I'll turn on the machine. Slowly introduce the cutter. go in about 1/4 inch. And then measure the bore again. Okay, now we can check this area here with our snap gauge again and make sure that we're cutting the proper size. If we're not, we can make another adjustment to the cutter. It's the perfect size.
For bore repair made easy, contact Bore Repair Systems today. It's the best or nothing.